Welcome, and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's conference. At that time, you may press star 1 on your phone to ask a question. I would like to inform all parties that today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the conference over to your host, Earlene Dowell. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you, Danielle, and thank you to Lisa West from the Census Bureau for hosting our webinar. Good afternoon, everyone. In light of the recent transition to 100% telework, we are utilizing technology off-site to continue operations. We aim to minimize interruptions as much as possible, but we appreciate your patience if we experience any technical delays. Please utilize the chat feature to notify us of issues should any arise, and we will do our best to address them. All webinars and Q&A sessions are recorded and will be accessible from the Census Academy's Webinars tab once the recording and transcripts are available. Please go to www.census.gov/academy. Please save all your questions to the end of the presentation, and thank you for your continued support of our outreach and education efforts. On behalf of the U.S. Census Bureau and the Local Employment Dynamics Partnership, in collaboration with the Council for Community and Economic Research and the Labor Market Information Institute, welcome to the October LED webinar, a preliminary investigation into the metro area job-to-job flows and earnings data in the manufacturing sector with our presenter, Dylan Schafer. This presentation will look at hires and separation rates in Detroit from job-to-job flows and flows from and to persistent non-employment from 2001 to 2017, earnings at the origin job and destination job, track job flows into and out of the Detroit metropolitan area and industry sectors, and analyze workers in greater depth by age, education, and gender to offer more insight. Dylan Schafer graduated from Michigan State University with a BS in economics since 2015. Dylan has been working with the Bureau of Labor Market Information and Strategic Initiatives in the Bureau's Detroit office. He first started his work under the Occupational Employment Statistics Program, where he focused on analyzing job vacancy data, and has since moved into the quarterly Census of Employment and Wages, where his focus is the collection and analysis of industry employment and wages. He is the regional contact for the East Michigan Prosperity region, where he provides all sources of labor market data for Michigan's regional customers. With that, I hand it over to Dylan.
Hi, thank you for that great introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Dylan Schafer. I'm an economic analyst with the Bureau of Labor Market Information and Strategic Initiatives in Michigan. I am here to present to you a brief presentation on the job-to-job flows and earnings data for the manufacturing sector, specifically in the Detroit, Warren, Dearborn metropolitan statistical area. So the content of this presentation, it was created in collaboration with my since-retired colleague, Dr. Nisa Rashid, so I just want to acknowledge her in that. So the main objective of this project was to gain insight into job and earnings behaviors within the manufacturing sector in the Detroit MSA. So we did so by creating graphs and data visualizations that were used to track hires and separation rates, flows from and to persistent non-employment, flows into and out of the manufacturing sector, along with job-to-job flows by age, education, and gender. So we also looked at earnings changes for workers, for those switching industries, and for those moving across metro areas. Just to give you some insight and understanding of the manufacturing sector in the Detroit MSA, here's a chart showing total private employment using data from the quarterly Census of Employment and Wages from 2001 until 2019. The most recent annual data is only available through 2019, where employment totaled around 254,000. Looking at the chart, you can see that we are nearly back to pre-recessionary employment levels from 2007, where there was more than 255,000 employed in the sector. These are private sector jobs. The Detroit MSA, it was chosen as the central focus because of its relevance to our state's labor market. To give you context, the Detroit MSA accounts for nearly 47% of all private employment according to industry data. And we focused on the manufacturing sector because it is our state's largest industry if looking at private employment. The Detroit MSA contains nearly 41% of all manufacturing employment in the state. So for this presentation, we're not just looking at job-to-job flows to track growth. We're instead using the data to look at job movement from one job to another or from non-employment within the manufacturing sector. Just to kind of preface a little bit, if you wanted to quickly access job-to-job data, you can do so using the JobtoJob Explorer tool that's currently available on the Census website. It's an interesting tool that provides analysis and visualizations for the construction of tables, maps, and charts to help compare, aggregate, and analyze flows by worker and firm characteristics. The data in the slides doesn't come directly from the J2J Explorer. Instead, we use the raw data files that are available to download on the Census website. I'll be going over how to access those files later during the presentation if you wanted to do so. All right, so starting off, we're going to be going into job-to-job flows, focusing on hires and separations data. Just to give you some additional insight into the variables that we'll be looking at for portions of the presentation, I'll be giving a brief description of each. So our first term here is job-to-job hires, which tracks an individual who moved from one job to another with a short or no observed non-employment spell. Then we also have job-to-job separations, which are job moves with short to no non-employment between jobs, but the separation is either voluntary or non-voluntary. Then we have hires from persistent non-employment, which is where an individual is hired into a position following a period of persistent non-employment, which is where the individual is not working for a minimum of 3 months. And finally, separations to persistent non-employment, which is when an individual is separated from their job and goes into a period of persistent non-employment. So now let's start looking at the data. Within this presentation, as I said before, we're going to be focusing on just the manufacturing sector in some way. We will first go into hires and separations data for the manufacturing sector within the Detroit MSA. Looking at the first chart to the left, you can see that it shows job-to-job hires and separation rates, with the dark green line being hires and the light green being separations. Now, the separation rate and hire rate is calculated by dividing the number of job-to-job hires or separations by the number of jobs. When looking at the chart, we can see that job-to-job hire rates are greater than separation rates, which means that workers are likely job hopping from other industries and areas and moving into the manufacturing sector in the Detroit MSA. The chart on the right shows job-to-job hires from persistent non-employment and separation to persistent non-employment, with the light green being hires and dark green again being separations. Looking at the chart on the right, you can see that from 2007 to 2009, there was a sudden surge in separation to persistent non-employment. During that period, many individuals, not just in the manufacturing sector, experienced a period of long-term unemployment. During the same period, hires from persistent non-employment dipped slightly through 2009. Looking at the graph, you can see that in 2010, job movement peaked after the bankruptcy and has since declined. This means that there are less individuals who are being separated from their job and going into persistent non-employment. So since the recession, these rates have stabilized. All right, so now let's go into our earnings data. Okay, so using job-to-job data, we were able to find which industries had the most job-to-job flows into and from the manufacturing industry. The job-to-job flows column you see here, that top chart, is showing stable employment flows. Stable employment, of course, is when an individual received earnings from an employer in the given quarter, along with the previous and following quarter. So looking at the top 5 industries with the most job-to-job flows into manufacturing, we can see that there's been a noticeable increase in the overall flows from 2007 to 2017. And this is for the second quarter. For each of these industries, we can see that on average, individuals who move from one of these industries and into manufacturing have seen an overall increase in their earnings from their origin job to the destination job. Individuals moving into the manufacturing sector could expect a similar increase in earnings in 2007 as they would in 2017. In 2007, individuals moving from retail, trade, and manufacturing saw a near 46% increase in earnings, while in 2017, their earnings increased by 47%. So for that bottom chart, we're going to move into the top 5 industries with the most job-to-job flows from manufacturing. Topping that list in both 2007 and 2017 was administrative and support and waste management, with a total of 282 total job-to-job flows in 2007, and that being 352 in 2017. In all but one of these instances, we can see that earnings decline was comparing earnings at their origin job, which would have been in the manufacturing sector, to earnings in their destination job, which is one of these industries shown in the second table. So let's move on to some more earnings data. So this chart here shows the overall change in earnings for those moving from the manufacturing sector to another industry in the Detroit MSA. The light green line is origin earnings, the gray line is destination earnings, and the dark green bar is the percent change in earnings between the two. Looking at the chart, we can see that destination earnings were trending higher than origin earnings in recent years until we saw a drop in 2017. In many of the years leading up to the recession, origin earnings were typically greater than destination earnings for those moving out of the manufacturing sector. The largest disparity in change in earnings was in 2007, where those moving from the manufacturing sector to another industry saw a 17.7% decline in earnings, which is a pretty big drop. And in 2009, we had the second highest drop of 15.6%. In many of the years following the recession, earnings, appeared to improve. There's an overall positive net change. So let's look at the change in earnings for those moving into the manufacturing sector from other industries. So the lines are all the same as the last chart. And right off the bat, we can see that there's a significant gap between earnings made at the origin job and earnings made at the destination job. We can see that in all the years, minus 2008, individuals moving from one industry into the manufacturing sector have experienced an overall earnings gain. This shows that people are moving from job to job likely because they know they can make more at a new job, which in this case is a new job in the manufacturing sector. This next chart shows another earnings comparison, but this time for those moving from job to job within the manufacturing sector itself. So this is moving from one job in manufacturing to another job in the same sector. So looking at the percent change, we can see that in recent years, individuals moving from one job in the manufacturing sector to another job have earned more by doing so across the board overall. So barring a decline in percent change from 2011 to 2012, since then, both earnings have been steadily increasing. This may be reflective of an overall tight labor market where employers want to retain their employees, therefore they offer higher paying positions within their market. Now let's move into a comparison of earnings from one MSA to another. So this chart shows a list of the top 5 metropolitan areas in Michigan who had the most job-to-job flows within the manufacturing sector from the Detroit metropolitan area during the second quarter of 2017. So in this list, we have Ann Arbor, Flint, Grand Rapids, Lansing, East Lansing, and the Monroe MSA. What's interesting is that of these 5 MSAs with the most movement, 3 of them had a slight decline in earnings when comparing their earnings in Detroit to their earnings in the new MSA. For example, in the Lansing, East Lansing MSA, origin earnings were $14,724 the second quarter of 2017. And that's for those moving from the manufacturing sector in Detroit to Lansing. Compared to their destination earnings, which fell 7.6% down to just $13,680 for the quarter. All right, now let's move on. So here we are looking at the overall job-to-job flows within the manufacturing sector from the Detroit MSA to other MSAs. From 2007 until 2009, we can see that overall job flows declined during the recession. This is likely due to individuals not wanting to change jobs due to uncertainty in the job market at the time. So in recent years, we have seen a slight uptick in the number of job-to-job flows. And from 2011 to 2012, there was a large spike in the number of job-to-job flows out of the Detroit MSA, which then slowed the following year into 2013. So I thought this was a cool visualization. So this is, if you're not too familiar with Michigan and its metropolitan areas, here's a map showing the movement from the Detroit MSA to other metropolitan areas. So, of course, the vast majority of job-to-job flows were strictly within the Detroit MSA and staying within it, which accounted for 78.5% of all job flows. 2.5% of all job-to-job flows were from individuals moving from Detroit to Grand Rapids. Detroit being, of course, the largest manufacturing subset in terms of employment, and Grand Rapids being the second largest, followed by Ann Arbor with 2.4% and Lansing with 2%. And just to kind of show you how concentrated manufacturing really is within MSAs, only 4% of all job flows out of the Detroit MSA were to non-metropolitan areas. That's it for that topic right now. We can move into other subsets like, say, age. So using the raw job-to-job data files, you can disaggregate the data by age groups, which is shown here. So we're looking at the overall net job-to-job flows within the manufacturing sector as usual. This may be a little difficult to see, and I will be going over individual age groups shortly, but the top line is job flows for those age 14 to 18, and the second line is for those 19 to 21, followed by 22 to 24, and so on. Just glancing at it, you can see that those three age groups have a much higher rate of job-to-job flows than other age groups shown. Therefore, we could say the higher the age, the more stable with less job hopping. The younger the age group, the more job hopping. You may be wondering why there is so many job flows for those age 14 to 18. You would probably assume a lot would not be within the labor market during that segment, but my best guess for this group is you have a lot of students age 16 to 18 who are working in an apprenticeship program within the manufacturing sector. So you would often see a lot of job hopping because of that. So we can go a little further into age groups from here. So now we're going to look at those age 22 to 24 and those age 35 to 44. So the LEHD data allows you to pull data by individual age groups, with the one on the left being the 22 to 24, while the right those 35 to 44. The dark green line shows net job-to-job flows with little or no non-employment, while the light green line is net job flows with persistent non-employment. The gray line is the net growth, which is the combination of the two rates. And so for those age 22 to 24, for many of the years from 2001 to 2017, job movement from non-employment was typically greater than job movement for those who experienced little or no non-employment. This makes sense for an age group because within it, they're likely still in college and therefore not employed. The chart to the right tells a different story. Within this slightly older age group of 35 to 44, the rate of job movement from non-employment has been lower than job movement from one job to another. This could potentially imply that employers are not always hiring from the unemployed or non-employed pool. Therefore, those being hired from therefore those who are being hired are from the persistent non-employed, which is lower. So this next slide focuses on an older pool of individuals. The chart to the left shows those age 45 to 54, and the one on the right shows 55 to 64. So in both these charts, you can see that job-to-job movement has outweighed the rate of movement for those who had experienced persistent non-employment. One caveat is that for those age 45 to 54, in 2010, flows from persistent non-employment did outpace job-to-job flows for little to no non-employment. Overall, looking at the data, the net growth rate is stable in recent years for those age 25 and older. So the files from LEHD also allow you to view job flows by sex and age at the same time. This chart shown above is just to show you a brief glimpse of job-to-job flows for females by age in the manufacturing sector. So similar to a few slides ago where I showed you all the age groups, but this is for all sexes aggregated. So this tells an overall similar story. The rate of job-to-job flows have been relatively, steady in recent years for females age 25 and over. It is the younger female population that has seen a sudden change in their rates. All right, now let's talk about job-to-job flows and earnings by education. So first, let's look at job-to-job flows. The chart above shows you how the data can be disaggregated into educational attainment by industry and metropolitan area. So this chart shows you job-to-job flows by educational attainment in the manufacturing sector, again, within the Detroit metropolitan area. Instead of showing you all of the years from 2001 to 2017, I have chosen 5 years that seem relevant. So the level of job-to-job flows within the manufacturing sector in 2017 has returned to near 2001 levels for all the levels of education. By the end of the recession in 2009, flows were minimal, but by 2010 we could see that there was a noticeable increase, which shows that individuals may have been more confident in job changes at the time compared to the year prior. Those who possessed a high school diploma or equivalent with no college, we had no college, and those with some college or an associate's degree have shown to consistently have the most job-to-job flows within the manufacturing sector. All right, so now we can talk a little more about earnings. So this slide shows you the earnings by origin and destination for those who have a bachelor's degree or higher in the manufacturing sector. There's been a steady climb in earnings in recent years. Looking at the chart in recent years, you can see that those moving from job to job in the manufacturing sector with a bachelor's degree or higher, they've typically earned less at their new job. The most notable difference is in origin and destination earnings was in 2007 at the start of the recession. During this year, those who possessed a bachelor's degree or higher who moved jobs within the manufacturing sector saw a decent decline in earnings by doing so. We can go a little further into the data and start looking at those with some college or an associate's degree. So unlike those moving from job to job in the manufacturing sector with a bachelor's degree, those with some college or an associate's degree have continued to earn more at their new job than they did at their old one. Also, we can see that there's been a healthy increase in earnings over the years for individuals within the subset. All right, so that was fun, right? That's the majority of what I want to go over with the data. Now let's recap a little bit. So here's a list of some of what I thought were some key takeaways from the data. First being in the Detroit metropolitan area, job flows have been steady after the recession and bankruptcy. Second, the largest job transitions to the manufacturing sector are from the administrative and support and waste management sector. Third, job movement into the manufacturing sector from other industries brings in higher earnings. Fourth, younger workers have a higher rate of job flows. The rates decline as workers' age increases. And finally, 5, earnings for those with some college or associate's degree have typically been higher at the destination job compared to that bachelor's degree or higher. So I want to go over briefly how to download the data to access everything I've been showing within this presentation. So in order to download the job-to-job data, you want to go to the link above at the top of the slide. You can choose your period, region, and file type and format. For the file type dropdown, you can choose whether you want count data, rate data, and origin destination job characteristics data. We have used all these files when putting together this presentation. There's also some helpful documents on the sidebar that give breakdowns of what variables mean. Believe me, that's very helpful because if you're looking at these data files, there are so many variables. So if you're looking to find data pertaining to a specific metropolitan area, once you submit the file type, you can choose either at the statewide level or MSA level. And here's just a description of JobtoJob Data. I won't go through this, but you have access to it on the presentation after this. There's more additional information on data available, again, just for your own use. And that's it. All right, so that is all I had for my presentation. I hope you did enjoy some of the introductory research that Dr. Anitha Rashid and I put together for this brief presentation. And thank you.
So Danielle, we're ready for questions.
All right, thank you so much. We will now begin the question and answer session. If you'd like to ask a question, please press *1, unmute your phone, and record your name clearly when prompted. Your name is required so we can introduce you for your question. If you need to cancel your question for any reason, please press *2. It should take just a moment for some questions to come through. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please press *1.
Thank you, Danielle. And while we're waiting, please keep your questions pertaining to the presentation with one follow-up question. And if you have any questions pertaining to the 2020 census, please go to 2020census.gov. Dylan, while you were presenting, we did have one question that I was unable to answer. The question is, long-term unemployment is classified as 3 months. Is that correct?
Sorry, I may have misspoke before. I believe it's actually 3 quarters. So it's the actual quarter that's in reference following the preceding quarter as well. And they have to be employed the quarter following. Sorry, they have to be not employed then following. I may be misquoting that. I can look it up real quick.
So while we're waiting, some of the questions that did come through, Dylan, were that I answered were about where the data comes from. So I just let the attendees through the chat know that the data comes from unemployment insurance wage records and the QCEW. All states send us their administrative records, and then LEHD combines that with censuses and surveys to create this very rich data source for our users.
Yeah, that's a great overview of where it all comes from. There's, of course, varying levels of what the data covers, too. So, like, for example, the data doesn't cover those who are excluded from UI coverage among the private sector, like, say, independent contractors or those self-employed. It doesn't include federal government jobs that are not covered by state UIs, and that all doesn't get shown into the JobtoJob Flows data. But overall, it's a very comprehensive data set.
And then there was one other question that I answered, and just to make sure that I answered that correctly too, was, do the actual numbers shown on the early figures report actual numbers or numbers in thousands? So I answered that it was actual numbers because I don't know JobtoJob Flows or any of our data to be in the thousands. Is that correct, Dylan?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So we were just looking at a specific geography level and industry. So it's not always a huge number within a quarter for job flows, but it can vary by industry. In that situation, yeah, you're only seeing a few hundred coming from specific industries, which may not seem like a lot, but it does add up if you look at the overall total for job flows within an industry.
Great. Danielle, are there any questions on the phone?
There are. Our first question today comes from Joe Darton with Michigan State University. Go ahead, Joe. Your line is open.
Thank you very much. I appreciated the presentation, Dylan. My question is whether all of the information you provided also exists for racial groups.
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, you can find documentation out there for this data set, and it does actually give a breakdown of what levels of race and ethnicity it is available for. But it should be majority of the major fields.
Okay, so the answer is yes.
Yes. Easy enough, yes.
Okay, thank you.
As a reminder for our participants, if you would like to ask a question, please dial *1 and record your name when prompted. Our next question comes from Melva Franklin. Go ahead, your line is open.
Hi, great presentation, Dylan. Thank you for sharing. Very insightful. I've got kind of a two-part question. And the first is, with apologies because I missed the beginning of the presentation, whether the incomes that were reflected were actual annual incomes, or was that a representation of the change in annual income? And then secondarily, are you able to make some statement about the current economic status for those populations that you studied? If you follow, was there any substantial change in economic status for those populations of people?
Yeah, so I'll cover the first one at least right now regarding the earnings data. So this earnings data is only showing quarterly earnings. So I was displaying it typically for 2017 quarter 2, just because at the time that was what was available when this presentation was originally put together. Since then, we've had more current data. I believe we're going until 2019 quarter 3, I think now is available right now.
Okay.
But as for the...
I think that's correct. Sorry, Dylan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Going into the second part of your question, I haven't done an update on this presentation with newer data. I am actually very interested in looking at the data for once any 2020 data is available, because I would love to compare what I'm seeing within our current research to what's going to be happening during this year. I know I can't speak to when 2020 data will be available using LEHC data, but I am very interested to see what kind of flows data is out there.
Will you be posting it once you've had a chance to look at that?
We've had some discussions about possibly doing some research projects about it, but I can't say for sure that that is in pipeline just yet.
Okay.
But feel free to reach out to me via my email, and I can send you it if we ever do. Or you can actually sign up to our subscription service on our website to receive any updates on any employment or unemployment-related data. Okay.
Well, I'm very curious about how families are faring in this economic decline compared to previous recessions and previous increases over the period just prior to 2016 compared to now.
Yeah, believe me, I know that's going to be a hot topic here coming soon, or it already is, really. Yeah, I think it's going to be a point of research for a lot of us using this data, because it is a fantastic resource to track origin and destinations for individuals within states or metropolitan levels.
Yeah, what you see in here, it looks like most people are really struggling, but what you hear in certain populations is that that's not the case. So, yeah. I'll try and reach out to you via email.
Yeah, please do.
Will do.
We show no further questions in queue at this time. Speakers, you may proceed.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Danielle, and thank you, everyone, for your questions. I would just like to close out with we appreciate everyone joining us this afternoon. And to join us next month on Wednesday, November 18th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, when Matthew Stager presents JobtoJob Flows and the Consequences of Job Separation. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe.
That concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may disconnect at this time.